Morning, everyone, distinguished colleagues, members of the distinguished panel, Plenary 1. I'm Kumar Ramakrishna. I'm from RSIS. I'll be the moderator for this plenary session on how faith can bridge divides. This plenary seeks to critically examine the reasons for the rise and endurance of social polarization due to ideological or religious beliefs. In other words, we want to discuss how faith could be weaponized in destructive ways through extremist ideologies that promote us-them thinking and social polarization, for example, and what to do to prevent such an outcome. As such, I'll be asking our panel to share from their own experiences, in essence, how religious faith can be harnessed in a positive fashion to bring various faith communities together. Despite a history, in some cases, of disturbed interfaith relations and perhaps even conflict, I have asked our panelists to think about real-life examples from their own rich experiences of how faith, expressed in a multitude of ways and practical grassroots initiatives, can be a powerful, constructive force for good on the ground. So with that brief preamble as the backdrop, let me introduce the panelists, all of whom are extremely distinguished in their own right. I think sharing just a bit of each speaker's background will give you, the audience, important context for their opening remarks, which we will hear shortly. Dr. Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, a Stanford PhD, is a renowned spiritual leader, author, and social activist based in the Himalayas in India. She's the Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Clean Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene Alliance, President of Divine Shakti Foundation, and Co-President, Religions for Peace. Sadhvi serves on the United Nations Advisory Council on Religion and on the steering committees of the International Partnership for Religion and Sustainable Development and the Moral Imperative to End Extreme Poverty, a campaign by the United Nations and the World Bank. After Sadhvi, Lord Alderdice, an old friend of RSIS, who has been an active Liberal Democrat member of the House of Lords since 1996, will speak. As leader of the Northern Ireland's Alliance Party from 1987 to 1998, Lord Alderdice played a significant role in the negotiation of the 1998 Belfast Good Friday Agreements that brought an end to the conflict in Northern Ireland between the Protestants and the Catholics. When the new Northern Ireland Assembly was elected, he became its first speaker. After that, the British and Irish governments appointed him to be one of the 4 members of the Independent Monitoring Commission established to end the operations of the terrorist groups operating in Northern Ireland. He is the founding chairman, now emeritus chairman, of the Centre for Democracy and Peace Building in Belfast. He now heads the Changing Character of War Centre at Pembroke College, University of Oxford. He's also Senior Research Fellow at Harris Manchester College at Oxford and Director of the Centre for the Resolution of Intractable Conflict and founding chairman of the Concord Foundation and Independent Peace Building Organization. Welcome, Lord Alderdice. After Lord Alderdice, Imam Uzair Akbar will speak. He is a well-known and respected scholar and prominent leader in the Muslim community of Australia. He has been the appointed Imam for over 2.5 decades in the century-old Holland Park Mosque located in Brisbane. He has many appointments. One of them is the President of the Council of Imams, Queensland, member of the Australian National Imams Council, head of the Shariah Advisory Board with Amanah Islamic Finance Australia, amongst many other hats. Imam Uzair is a long-term advocate for the Muslim community in Australia and regularly appears in many multi-faith forums and engagements for schools, professionals, defense, and police personnel. In fact, you can actually see him on Netflix. He has a very popular documentary called The Mosque Next Door. Highly recommend that you watch that. Last but not least, Venerable Guang or Shifu is Abbot, President of the Samantabandra Vihara, Secretary General of the Singapore Buddhist Federation. Shifu is also first Vice President of the Metta Welfare Association, serving the community's special education, welfare, and social needs. He was ordinated at Fuhua Monastery and received high ordination at Zuyun Temple, Taiwan. Shifu guides Buddhists and like-minded ones on the path to a harmonious way of life through sharing, classes, and consultations, and he meets people from different walks of life. I know him as someone who is a committed interfaith advocate, so welcome, Shifu. Thank you. So, in short, we have a very diverse mix of speakers with very unique and rich personal perspectives, which should add to a very engaging discussion. So how this will work is that each speaker will have approximately 10 minutes to make some key opening remarks, and the sequence will be as follows. Sadhvi ji will be up first, followed by Lord Alderdice, followed by Imam Uzair, and finally Shifu. After all the speakers have made the opening remarks, I will facilitate the discussion and also manage questions from the floor, so I hope to have questions from all of you. So with that, over to you, Sadhvi ji. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kumar. It's such an honor to be here. I would like to begin by extending really deep gratitude to the Honorable President of Singapore, the government, the ministry working under her leadership, to RSIS and the entire team that has brought us here today. It's a critical gathering, critical theme, coming together for cohesive and connected societies. I want to begin in the forest. A lot of religious traditions have stories of their sages, their saints, their mystics, their prophets, spending time dwelling in the forest, connecting with the divine. But I want to start today by talking about a specific forest, the redwood forest, which is indigenous to California, where I'm originally from before I moved to India 26 years ago. The redwood trees are the world's tallest trees, growing to hundreds and hundreds of feet tall. And they're also some of the world's oldest trees, living for many hundreds and even more than 1,000 years, through earthquakes, through fires. Now, one would think in order to live so long and be so strong, their roots must be really deep in the ground. But actually, the secret of the redwood forest is that their roots, rather than being individually deep, are interconnected. The roots of every redwood tree are connected to the roots of every other redwood tree. And that interconnection is what nourishes and nurtures their strength. And that's the message for us today, is a message of connection. And religion, ultimately, is that which is supposed to connect us to God or the divine, or however we conceive of that supreme reality, to connect us to our true self, which is not separate from the divine, to connect us to each other, to our communities, and to connect us to a system, an order of understanding our values, our morals, our ethical principles, individually and for our communities. But tragically, as Professor Catherine Marshall spoke so beautifully about this distinction between the ideal and the real, tragically, in the reality, we are seeing so much that connection that religion is supposed to bring, leading to disconnection, to polarization, to othering. And human psychology teaches us that in times of stress, in times of fear, times of threat, real or imagined, we contract. Fear makes us contract. The lines between us and them get thicker and thicker. The circle of us gets smaller and smaller. We saw this recently very tragically in COVID. Fear of illness and death led to so much finger-pointing, vilification, scapegoating of who was responsible for super spreader events, who wasn't following safe COVID protocol. It got so bad that there were times where groups of different religions would not even buy fruits and vegetables from each other's carts. Another major source of fear and stress, and therefore a contraction of us versus them, is scarcity of resources, scarcity of water, scarcity of food. And that's why we launched our Global Interfaith WASH Alliance, or GIWA. And it's a beautiful acronym as well, because in the Sanskrit language, Jiva means life. So we launched our Global Interfaith WASH Alliance with UNICEF, with the government of the United States, the government of the Netherlands, to bring about a revolution in WASH, water, sanitation, and hygiene, to bring about a water-safe world in which everyone has access to clean water, to sanitation, to hygiene. And we do this work because we are committed to alleviating suffering, today's and tomorrow's. But also, we do this work to confront the impending scarcity of resources that directly works to prevent the violent conflict that we see when there is that scarcity. Our work begins with an extended definition of peace, that it's not enough to just refrain from killing each other with guns and missiles and bombs, but that peace must include prevention of that which leads to suffering, conflict, and strife. It's predicted that by 2040, the world is only going to have half the drinking water it needs. India is on track to be there by 2030. And we're told that up to hundreds of millions of people will be refugees, having to leave their homes due to issues directly related to this water crisis. At the time that we launched GIWA, over 600 million people in India were defecating in the open every day. And about 1,600 children under the age of 5 were dying every day due to the ramifications of this open defecation, due to lack of clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. And since our launch just under a decade ago, we've been able to trigger mass mobilizations of hundreds of millions of people in India and across the world. And over the years, we've also expanded our focus to include widespread work for gender equality, ending gender-based violence, ending child marriage, and bringing about a revolution in menstruation so that our girls don't have to drop out of school when they hit puberty. It's said that faith can move mountains. We're very happy for the mountains to be where they are, but we've been harnessing the power of faith to move the minds and therefore the behaviors of communities toward healthier and sustainable societies for all. But the power of these relationships that are founded upon, this power of the friendship, transcends a revolution toward clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. These connections and these friendships have enabled us to help bring people together, to dissolve borders between us and them, to end scapegoating, to end polarization, to end the vilification. There isn't time to share all of it, but just in COVID, for example, even during the time of lockdowns, we were able to bring so many leaders together in webinars, through public service announcements, in that time of crisis, because we had the foundation of friendship and relationships that had been built up over the years. There's so many lessons, and I've got only a minute left. So very, very quickly, don't wait until there is violence. We must plant the seeds now, those seeds of interconnectiveness. And this can be done by uniting together against a common enemy, fighting against climate change, against environmental destruction, against water scarcity, against gender-based violence, serves as an invaluable tool to prevent polarization and violence. And second and lastly, which makes me so happy to be here, work with the youth. We have had great, great success in bringing students from madrasas together with Hindu students from gurukuls to spend days together, living together, learning from each other, and learning how similar we are in so many core ways. And those lessons have formed the foundation for peace in their minds and therefore in their actions. Religion should give us the courage to resist that which must be resisted. It needs to give us the courage to say no just as much as the courage to say yes. And today we have the power to say no to the polarization, to the vilification, to the othering, and to all of those aspects in society that are creating and strengthening and exacerbating that division. And we have the power to say yes to working together before we hit crises. We have the power to not only put out fires of violence, but actually to successfully fireproof our communities. And it's such an honor to be here, and with deep, deep gratitude to the organizers for giving us this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next up, Lord Alderdice.
Bridging divides should come naturally to us. From the start, we have an impulse to engage with, to relate with the wider universe of being, not just people and other living beings, but our environs. As babies and young children, we naturally relate with what is close by, and later we engage with people and places as widely as is possible for us. We explore and engage to understand and find meaning, but also to have a sense of relatedness that moves us and takes us beyond the boundaries of ourselves. Now, we search not only for those engagements that will satisfy the basic requirements of survival, water, food, warmth and shelter, but also the relatedness that makes these things possible and gives us, in addition, an experience of relationship, of not being alone. But if I want to relate, why do we get into conflict with each other? Well, as René Girard has shown, when I relate with someone, I often imitate them. And if I imitate your desire, I come into conflict with you, because if I want what you want, or even more importantly, who you want, I'll quickly come to rival for the attention of that person. And that's why we sometimes create boundaries of law or social propriety or even religion to protect us from that tendency to rival. Well, I've started to ask the question, why? And as soon as we're able to do so, that's what we do. That question, why, sometimes comes with increasing frequency and frustration, as any parent or child care worker knows. Why? But why? But why? Well, we want to understand how things relate and connect, not only so that we can appreciate how to service our basic needs, but also to understand how to relate to people and places where we find ourselves. We want to protect ourselves from harm, of course, but we also want to ensure and repeat those experiences that give us satisfaction. And we try to understand how the world works. This is not merely intellectual curiosity. It's part of how we try to relate better with our surroundings. At first our close surroundings and then our wider relationships, however small or large we construe that universe of relationships to be. And as we get much older and we begin to lose some of those faculties, we slip back into simply trying to maintain the knowledge and the understanding and relationships we already have. But that relatedness, bridging the divide between us and the other, remains a fundamental driver of our existence. Speaking of that relatedness, the Irish theologian Ernest Davey defined religion as the most ultimate, the most real and compelling form in which we conceive our social or universe relationships. And even for those who don't describe themselves as religious, these things are extremely important. Now, since the Enlightenment, that intellectual upheaval, we would have come to think that maybe the intellectual component of our being should be regarded as the primary and dependable mode of engagement. But, it doesn't really apply to us. The great English football manager once said, "Football is not a matter of life and death. It's much more important than that." For him and for many people, particularly men, football is their religion. And it doesn't apply in our personal relationships. When as a boy at school I started to make a relationship with the girl who became and still is my wife, it was not merely an intellectual calculus of benefit or suitability, but powerful feelings of attraction, excitement, and interest. That's why Davey went on to speak of religion not just as a cognitive conception, but an experience of all the ways in which we can engage in relationship, and the realization of the principles of values, ideals, and aspirations bound up with this deepest element of being humankind. We've always had a sense of relation to something greater than ourselves, with its own particular satisfactions and discomforts. But this highest and best and most ultimate experience, especially when it transcends our immediate social and personal experience, has a sense of mystery within it. It goes beyond our intellectual understanding and helps us to understand what the great English theologian James Martineau said when he meant, all our intellectual propositions are provisional. Science at its best maintains this provisional nature of our understanding, but scientists sometimes seem to think that they've reached an end of that understanding, and they are as mistaken as Francis Fukuyama was when he proclaimed the end of history in that social science we call political science. But just as the building of relationships with people involves taking a risk and venturing out beyond what we know, so a life of faith requires us to venture out beyond what we know of our universe of other and others. It's not so much a theology as a way of being in the world. And faith understood in this way is rather different from belief, especially a belief that has a degree of certitude about things about which we cannot really be certain. So we come to that childlike question, why, which goes beyond who and what and where. Why is it so? It takes us beyond to the experience of pleasure or satisfaction, even exhilaration, as we seize upon some understandings, provisional as they are. But then we make them into doctrines and dogma and rules and regulations and even laws. Those ways of understanding and places we associate with it become rituals and liturgies, professions of faith and places of pilgrimage, and they are attempts to express and re-experience a sense of transcendence that goes beyond ourselves. In this we have a struggle. especially those from the later Western traditions of the Enlightenment. We believe that to understand rationally is to fully and deeply appreciate. And that's why many of my liberal colleagues tend to focus so much on constitutions and the regularizing of social relationships and decision-making in voting and elections and the law. The law is a good servant, but it's a bad master. In the Irish peace process that led to the end of the period of political violence that we call the Troubles, through reaching the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in '98, we came to understand that our disputes, our problems, were not just arguments about laws and borders and political systems, and policing, administration of justice, or even economic difference, but about disturbed historic relationships between people that lived on the island of Ireland and our neighbours. We had to venture into the dangerous territory of building relationships, those of us who had been at war with the other. Not just as individuals did we have to build relationships, but with individual political leaders and party leaderships who could take their cohort of society with them. And the trust, which is a way of peace, was not a prerequisite of venturing out, a taking of risks, but rather an outcome of the steps of faith which were rewarded by a positive response. Not always, and certainly not inevitably, but sufficiently to enable the relationships to develop. My Oxford colleague Dominic Johnson has pointed out that rather than rationality resolving the problems, those who operate contrary to the laws of rational and responsible behavior sometimes do better than those who do. And in this, we have seen a deep division, a polarization in geopolitics, leaving those who regard themselves as rational, reasonable, and progressive on one side, and those driven by a more emotional response opposing them. Our relationships are indeed not reassuring. They are threatening. We have talked about how we are hopefully moving post-COVID. We've had pandemics before. But since 1945, we have the capacity not only to destroy each other in wars, but to destroy the whole of human civilization permanently. And that is also true because of our lack of concern and proper stewardship of the environment. It's producing a kind of long, slow suicide of mankind. It's vital that at this time of great danger, we recognize that an attempt to relate to each other as living beings and to our world as an organism of inconceivable complexity and to the other that transcends it all, that this is necessary for our very survival. We must listen to those with whom we differ, whether conservatives who do not want change, fundamentalists who do want change, but they want a change to an idealized past that never existed. As my friend Ed Shapiro says, when I meet someone with whom I disagree, I should not address what they're wrong about, but ask myself the question, what are they right about? In Singapore, you have a particular opportunity, but also a profound responsibility. This conference shows that you recognize that because you grasp the opportunity not just to develop information science and technology to a high degree, but you have the experience of different cultures, religions, and ways of being in the world that come from people with whom you live in Singapore and the neighborhood in which you're placed. You have a complex history and geography, which means you can't comfortably ignore those who differ from you. Just as we in Ireland had to recognize that neither side could be defeated and neither could win through physical force or driving the other out. We had to find new ways of structuring a society, not a society in which we agreed with each other, but in which we could find a way of disagreeing without killing each other. As Isaiah Berlin has taught us, there is not, nor will there be, an agreement on the good. And that requires pluralism in our society and our structures. Around the world, people are coming to realize that if we do not work with each other, we will destroy ourselves through war, climate change, famine, or disease. We must approach these challenges with a childlike naivety, not childish, but childlike, for we are all little weak infants in the face of the immensity of time, space, and that which goes beyond time and space. An openness to engage with each other and mystery. It's not the certainty of our beliefs, but the mystery of faith that will enable us to bridge the divide between our world in danger where we split apart and a doorway of hope through which we can pass together. And that is what we are here to explore today and for the next 3 days. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lord Alderdice, for very erudite remarks. Next up, Imam Uzair, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon each and every one. First of all, I would like to say thank you very much to all that organized this beautiful program. We pray to the Creator, who is the absolute guide, that He guide us to that, and especially guide me right now to say in that which will be productive, which can be used by myself and by all those that are witnessing to leave this world as a better world. There have been beautiful minds before me, beautiful speakers before me, and I believe there's going to be beautiful speakers, excellent speakers after me that are going to speak about social cohesion. I'm going to start off by reciting a verse from the Holy Scripture, from the Holy Quran, in which God Almighty takes us back to where we started from. Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلِيمٌ خَبِيرٌ. The translation more or less is that, O mankind, we have created you from a male and a female. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ. Then we made you into nations and into tribes. لِتَعَارَفُوا. So you could recognize one another. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Verily the best amongst you is that person who is God-fearing. Inna Allaha alimun khabir. Verily Allah, the Creator, He knows everything and He is all aware. Sadaqallahu al-azim, He has spoken the truth. I would like to make mention of a few fine points pertaining to this verse. Indeed, we are divided from day one. But God Almighty has given us a platform. Now, that platform can accommodate everyone. It's up to us how we manage that platform. As we see many a times that there are many people in a bus, and from outside you see that there's no room, and the doors open. Somehow, the people outside make it inside. So there's adjustments. A better example for the women that are sitting here, when the women say that there's groceries, can you put it into the fridge? And I open the door, or we open the door, and we say that there's no room in the fridge. So she says that that's what you say all the time. So we go and sit on the couch to watch something. After 5 minutes, when we return, there's nothing on the ground. It's all in the fridge. How did they do that? They moved a few things from here to the right, to the left, and they squeezed the groceries into the fridge. Indeed, we are going to be tested as human beings. Sometimes it will seem that that platform has no room, no accommodation for anyone else. But if we are sensible and we are compassionate and we have empathy, we will find room. The question is, in terms of social cohesion, are we ready to make a sacrifice? That is the question. Because relationships, may it be relationship with the Creator or relationship with people around you that form communities and nations, it demands sacrifice. No relationship can blossom and flourish and grow from strength to strength without sacrifice. How much are we ready to sacrifice to bring on people that are not on that platform. The religions, and as I am a Muslim, I'm representing Islam. The religion of Islam speaks about internal purity. When we play golf and we go to the driving range, there is a board and it says, "Let your demons out." So hit the ball as hard as you can. It doesn't matter if you shank it, you slice it, you draw it, hit as hard as you can. So everyone has demons inside. Faith comes to harness those demons, to control those demons. Wherever we see that the fabric of humanity has been disturbed, it's because of greed. It's because a person has not controlled his internal demon. The internal sicknesses are still present. We need to remove that. This body is a double-edged sword. With this hand, I can give and bring a smile on the face of a person. With this same hand, I can take and give grief to a person. With this articulator, I can say a word that will melt the heart. I can say to a person, "I love you." That person will fall fond of me. I can say something very, very aggressive, and it will burn the heart. Faith, and all faiths, I will say, they speak about using this machine productively. I have many, many experiences because being in this field, and most of us have our own experiences. I'm going to make mention of one experience. One day, I was with my wife at a superstore, and I was paying for my groceries. And I saw a person in tattoos staring me down. And I was wearing this. So the person is staring at me. And I thought the first thing that came in my mind is that once I pay, I'm going to have to pay for the hospital bill because he's going to knock me. So I looked at him, he looked at me, and then he disappeared. Then I was pushing the trolley and I saw him at the exit door. So think about what's going through my mind. And I'm walking with my trolley, and I see him at the exit door, and he says, "Excuse me." And I'm getting ready. He said, "Excuse me." I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you a Muslim?" I said, "Yes, I'm a Muslim." He said that you're the first Muslim that smiled at me. For many, many years I've been looking to speak to a Muslim, but I'm hesitant. I have reservations. And whenever I look at a Muslim, I don't find a smile. I was smiling because I was scared. That's why I was smiling. But it worked in my favor. And we sat down and he said, "Look, I'm a Christian brother. I've been working in this sector and I wanted to speak to a Muslim brother, but I haven't found a Muslim brother that I feel comfortable with." Indeed, all these brilliant minds will speak about things that we need to do on a government level, media level. But if we can go from here with one thing, let's walk away from this conference with a smile on our face, a permanent smile. Whoever we come across, may he be from a different faith, may he look different than us, we can smile. This will go miles towards bringing social cohesion. This smile is amazing. In our culture, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, they say, "Zaban ka bada karwa, dil ka bada acha." They say that this person is very bitter with his tongue, but very good with his heart. I don't agree with that. I will never know what is in his heart. I will never know what is in his heart. I will only see what is on the face. the first thing that you will come across if you are going to see me, visit me, or the first thing that I will see of you is your face. That face has to have that radiant smile that people around you feel comfortable. And that is the first ingredient towards cooking the pot of social cohesion. I can have all the ingredients, and I can put the pot on the stove, and if I don't have the match, you're not going to cook anything. If our body language doesn't give comfort to our people around us, my face doesn't give comfort, I'm not going to succeed. I would like to conclude on the statement of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He says, Al-khalqu iyalullah. The entire creation is the family of God. And if we are, in our own capacity, trying to please God, but we're not pleasing the family of God, we can't please God. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Imam Uzair. Excellent comments. Over to you, Shifu.
Yes, I would really like and echo that smile and remind us to smile more, and especially when we're more stressed. And smiles melts people. And when it comes to smile, right, I share with a lot of young people. You don't have money, you may not have time, but you can just share a smile. And it's something interesting and universal. So good morning, honorable guests, leaders, fellow panelists, our moderator, Prof. Kumar, everyone that is listening here and online. As what Madam President said, I'm actually also a YLP alumni myself. So I used to be from there, now I'm here. So my journey of explorations means the meaning of happiness or wellness started on me knowing what's the best of both worlds. Before that, in the world more than 2,000 years ago, Buddha gave a practical advice to a merchant in the market in Korea in response to Diga No, a merchant, questions on happiness and well-being in this life and beyond. The Buddha taught the interconnected symbolic relationship of economic welfare and spiritual welfare. So there are the four qualities that the Buddha shared with us. So let's start from the beginning. I've studied in the mission school, and I'm actually, at the same time, my family is of Chinese cultural belief. I have the best of both worlds as teenage. I learned to respect, observe, share the values that I learned in different systems of faith. I still remember I have very warm brothers, the Gabrielite brothers, who always be there for us. And I was like, wow, we are so lucky to have still brothers with us in those days. And I always remember to these days the motto of my school, to do good in whatever you do. So moving on. This is actually my first interfaith dialogue overseas in the Maha Chulalongkorn University. And we discussed about inter and intra-faith issues regarding religious tolerance and peace. And some of you here is actually my first interfaith friends that I met overseas as Singaporean instead of meeting in Singapore itself. That's the strange thing of Singaporean. We meet overseas. So, and in one of the morning, when we were having breakfast, there's this group of people come and take a photo for us. We say, is there anything wrong with us? They say, no. We suddenly see a monk, a Sikh, a bishop, and so on, sitting together so comfortably. There's no Singapore flag to say that, oh, we need to sit there. No. We are so comfortable eating our preference of food, and there is no issues with that. So, I was introduced to the RRCC, but now recently the RRCC, which means interracial and religious competence circle, it was renamed to racial and religious harmony circles. It's a progress that's building confidence among communities to practice harmonious living. So from there on, I proceed with my journey with the IRO, interreligious organizations. And in IRO, there's something very unique under the prayers and blessing groups. The 10 faith representatives will stand side by side in unity, in diversity in our spiritual prayers. Interfaith prayers by IRO has been around since 1949 in both national ceremonies and private events, and they are truly representative of Singapore religious harmony. On top of that, I frequent dialogues, sharings about faith, even under the youth wings. And we have regular kopi sessions or kebab sessions over tea or some outings. And before COVID, we met very often. And of course, we also cannot leave the women's out. Then we have the Women's of Faith, a community of interfaith engagements among the women of different faiths. So broadening engagement is very important. Contributing dialogues and panel discussions have been honed on my practice of humanities, grounded in the realistics of life. Many programs like CSCS, Common Senses of Common Spaces, Ask Me Anything, for example, and organized by ground initiative community partners like Roses of Peace, Hash Peace, Humanities Society, IRO, IRCCs, One People's OSG, Humanity Matters, Harmony Centers, and so on and so forth. Humanities is about acknowledging that we do not know and have answers to everything. We are not perfect. Therefore, we are here to unlearn misinformation, relearn, stay grounded in our values, and strategize towards gaining better clarity. Look at these running streams. It's difficult for me to see my reflection clearly. And only in still water, we can see the reflections clearly and even see what gathers at the bottom. The point of our dialogues is not about making my own points of views, but also to make clearly, to see different perspectives. There is always two sides of a point. So understanding each other different perspectives is very important. And do you anticipate positivity or negativity in dialogues? For example, there is a pair of twins who is going for roller coaster rides. Both anticipate, but one anticipate and for fun, and he have a lot of fun. And another twins anticipate with fear. After the rides, he just swear, I'm not going to have any roller coaster rides. So that's the same goes for dialogues. Before we came into this door, what do we anticipate? And I joined many interfaith dialogues and sharings. I listened with open heart and receptive mind. What we agreed to, we learn and act on it. What we may not agree on, we respect and let it be. We may not endorse in the same ideas or teachings, but we do not need to be in conflicts within our mind. Always see opportunities in learning something new and grow. Minorities or not, we shall respect and protect the dignity of all, regardless of race, language, or religion. Personally, I don't like to use the word minority much. Why so? As majority and minority, it really depends on where we draw the circles of context. For example, I belong to the Chinese majority in terms of race. In the context of faith, I represent the Buddhist monastic minority, even in here in this moment. So don't let the word majority or minority limits our ability to be perceptive. So, do we stop from understanding and angles of other views? And this due to our personal egos that we find hard to overcome. For example, think of an apple. What do you have in mind? Maybe a red apple or green apple. What about a purple apple? Some may even smell the apple pie. Or when you see apple, it's about a phone. So, don't allow So all these things arise from the mind perceptions, forming years of assumptions, stereotyping, and prejudice. Negatively charged perceptions arise from the greed, hatred, and delusions, or the ignorance of the mind. We can notice the difference, or even opposing ideologies that we may not endorse nor agree, but we can respect the choice of others' faith, just like how we practice the Buddha's teachings. Well, we respect any Chinese cultural belief, and there is always commonalities among faith that we can broaden our common grounds of values. Compassion expands our lens beyond prejudice or stereotyping to give praise to positive perceptions. Through the lens of interdependence, our mind tends to loving kindness, equanimity, and active listening, opens more channels of communication, creating common grounds and values. Listen to understand instead of listen to debate. In any interfaith discussion, it's never about aligning others' faith teachings to one's own faith. Ground sensing is also very important to be aware what is the concern and raise the concerns to the people who you can be with, or even to the authority. Propagation of faith is about the notations of bring clarity, and without the intention to convince or convert others, or forcing others to align into one's thoughts and beliefs. Yeah, I have clarity about the sound. At the time. Let me share a bit more. Forcing religious ideology into others, especially while they are practicing faith, can create micro-tension within families' relationships in our social fabrics. We could share with pure intentions of sharing our views, debunking any misinformation, and being non-intrusive. Disrespect the space of others and do not force others to live by our beliefs. Spiritual support in palliative care is very important. I believe that spiritual support is important in all stages of life, from cradle to grave. I journeyed with people in different stages of life, and palliative care is one that is close to my heart, to bring closure and edify the well of connections for the devotees, clients, and patients, washing away stress and unease. Focus on our shared universal values and uplifting support. I will always find time to find out what faith they are and what faith really means to them, and how they practice, and how best I can support them with my networks of interfaith friends if they don't identify with the Buddhist teachings. Avoid bedside conversions or deathside faith conversions. This can bring confusions and tension. Respect, speak to the faith of the clients that they practice most in their life, and find ways to support peaceful last breath in their physical flesh. If I came to know, for example, a Christian patient, I will ask him or her to pray to God. And even reminder, do you have a rosary with you? Or do you need something to hold on, to find peace? Because in this moment, this is what they really need. Or even, I will ask them, do you need me to link you with your faith leaders? Faith guides us in spirituality towards a wholesome living. It's a skillful, blameless, and praised by sensible people. And when we practice the teachings, it leads us to wellness and happiness. Harmony in practice of faith is what we envision and reflect through our body, speech, and mind. We shall not be complacent and continue to weave the social fabrics with wisdom, compassion, regardless of race or religion. This way, we can connect our community, and one very importantly, if any way unknowingly in my speech or through my actions I've caused any offense, or I'm unclear with my points, I seek your understanding and forgiveness. May there be peace in the heart and harmony in the minds of all sentient beings. May we all be well, safe, loved, and happy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shifu. Thank you all the speakers, panelists. We had a very good sharings from the various panelists. I mean, just to respond from my perspective as the moderator, I think one of how I have tried to frame what I've heard, I can express it the following way. Ideally speaking, right, religion, theoretically, conceptually, is a means by which society can foster social cohesion, because that is what religions do. Religion is something which is very instinctive, goes beyond intellect, as some of our speakers have said. It fulfills a very deep human need. However, if the society is peaceful, there shouldn't be an issue. Intergroup religious harmony shouldn't be a big challenge. However, as has been rightly pointed out by Sadhvi ji, when you have a situation where there is societal stress, anxiety, as she said, fear makes us contract. The circle of us gets smaller. In fact, both Sadhvi ji and Lord Alderdice pointed out the role which competition and contestation for scarce resources plays in promoting such intergroup stress. So in a situation where there is societal stress and where there are various other factors which promote such a societal stress, intergroup stress, religion, rather than bridging divides, can foster divides, promote us, them thinking or othering, right? So what do we do? I mean, what various speakers have broadly said is, Imam Uzair made a very good point. Are we willing, despite all the tensions and pressures around us, to still sacrifice to make social relations work? I mean, we must, can our faith help us to control our inner demons, right? Can our faith help us to moderate ourselves and to restrain ourselves from wanting to lash out in frustration or in fear? Can religion give us the courage to say no to polarization, right? Can we walk out continually with a smile despite the pressures around us? As Shifu has just said, we have to take the initiative to forgive when we are facing stressful situations, particularly in the time of societal conflict. So what all these strands which I've drawn from for the 4 excellent presentations to sort of like get us going, right, is this a suggestion, there seems to be, if you ask me, right, how religion can play a role in bridging divides, how faith can play a role in bridging divides, it really starts not at the societal level, but at the individual level, right? If our internal world is harmonious, right, if we can get it right inside, then this is perhaps more likely to affect social relations, relations between the in-group and the out-group in a more positive way. So what is the suggestion here? I would like the panel to think. So do you think that actually, when you talk about how faith can bridge divides, that the role of faith should really not be in the public space, but rather in the private space? In other words, as it has been said, religion changes the individual, and the individual changes the society, right? So, just wanted to throw that out and see what anybody wants to say. Anybody? Sadhvi ji?
Sure. So I think it's a really important point that the core purpose of faith, the core role of faith, is it changes us from the inside. When I am changed on the inside, how I move through the world changes. One of the things that I frequently say is that the spiritual ministry that I do, the spiritual talks that I give, the programs that I lead, are not only to give people individual, personal, internal peace, joy, meaning in life, but when people are at peace inside, when they're happy inside, when they're connected, with the fullness, the completeness, the wholeness, the presence of the divine within themselves, they are much less likely to either go out and harm another person directly, much less likely to go out and lash out in anger, also simultaneously much less likely to need to gobble up precious resources in order to feel okay about myself. So if my spiritual practice is meaningful and full and deep, and I'm overflowing with connection to the Creator, the creation, I'm much less likely to need shopping therapy or drinking therapy or eating therapy. I'm much less likely to be grabbed into groups that are fostering us versus them thinking, because my heart is open. So in response to your question, I think, yes, the individual is the foundation, the beginning, where it all has to happen. But how do you take the individual out of the society? I mean, you can't say it shouldn't happen externally. Who I am, I'm bringing into that society. If my smile is going to be real, it has to come from inside. So if I'm smiling in the world around me, if I'm bringing peace and love and togetherness in the world around me, I can only do that if I have it inside. And if I have it inside, I can't help but bring it into the world. I mean, an air conditioner can't help but to give us cold air, whether it's appropriate or inappropriate, whether we need it or don't need it. And if inside I'm conflicted and fearful and angry and resentful, that's what I'm going to bring to the world. So, yes, inside, and then through the internal, who we are in the world shifts, and we become transmitters of that peace, of that joy, of that love into our societies.
Thank you very much. Alderdice?
Well, I guess that for me, the thing that faith does is to help me understand that it's not all about me, and it's not all about what I think, and it's not all about my group. There is that which is beyond me, beyond my lifetime, beyond my group. And all that I think I know, or that my group believes it knows, is, as I was saying, rather provisional. The things that people were very certain about, went to war about, killed and died for, seem a few hundred years later curiously unimportant. Libraries are full of books that people wrote and nobody ever reads anymore. And yet, as you and I know, academics struggle to get their books written. And so I suppose for me, the important thing about faith is that it goes beyond these dogmas, doctrines, rituals, liturgies, and so on. And one of the problems for the ecumenical movement within Christendom in the 20th century, one of the reasons I think it completely lost momentum, was that it focused on all the things that people differed on. Focused on differences of doctrine, dogma, and ritual, and authority structures, and so on and so on. Whereas the common human experience of relationships is something that didn't get thought about and talked about so much. And for me, that's where faith takes us beyond individual religions. And in that sense, gives the possibility for society as a whole. Now, I suppose one of the places where I am a little unsure about how much this means that we are peaceful inside is that many of the great saints of all our traditions were quite troubled people. They weren't people who felt entirely at peace with everything. And in fact, the fact that they were troubled by things meant that they were prepared to sacrifice themselves and their comforts and so on for something that went beyond. And when we identify particular solutions to problems or particular causes, I think sometimes we're seizing upon things which have some truth in them, but we're putting too much emphasis. For example, when we were talking earlier on, some colleagues were talking about social media. It's really very important. But social media wasn't required for the Second World War, for the Holocaust.
Yeah.
We talk about the importance of education, which is true. But the most educated country in the world in the early part of the 20th century was Germany. So I think some of the reasons we give for things, we need to interrogate them, we need to struggle with them. But the one thing that I am rather sure about is that life is fundamentally about relatedness.
Yes.
And that relatedness is complex. And what was being pointed out by the chairman of the previous session, that there's a difference between complicated machines and complex sets of relationships. With a complicated machine, if one bit goes wrong, it stops, and you have to put a new bit in. With the complexity of systems, they will adjust in good ways and not so good ways. And it's that relatedness of existence, which is, I suppose, the key thing for me, and which is for me the essence of what faith is about. It's about embracing that uncertainty rather than declaring my certainty.
Thank you. Imam?
Beautiful.
Faith for myself. First of all, a human being is made up of two things. One is the body, and the second is the soul. So faith, may it be Christianity, Judaism, Islam, or any other faith, for them to succeed at a high level, they need to address both. They need to address the rules pertaining to what is needed for the body and rules pertaining to what is needed for the soul. As we have made mention before, that the mission of the religion is, and this is going to sound silly, but it is to work upon a human being so he remains as a human being. That is the mission. Because the Quran has made mention that there are going to be many, many people that have been sent as humans, but they have not behaved as humans. They have been degraded by their own actions. So the mission of faith is that we remain as humans. And one of the words for a human being is insan. And insan comes from the root word unus. And unus means love. So if a person is saying something or doing something that does not represent unus, he has degraded himself from the podium of insan, the podium of human being. Now, in regards to societies or individual practices, you asked the question and a thing came in my mind, and I just flew from Australia. The beautiful gentleman beside me, the handsome gentleman beside me from England. If the oxygen mask falls, what do they say? They say, take care of yourself. It's amazing. You love your child. It says, don't take care of your child right now. Take care of yourself. Then take care of your child. That's what religion is. Take care of yourself first, then work upon people around you. And there's a reason behind it. And this may be the core problem when it comes to faith. That if a person doesn't work upon himself, meaning his internal, and he starts working upon people around him, he's going to become judgmental. That's what faith does. This is one problem of faith. That a person thinks he's better than others. And once he starts to think that he's better than others, that's the first tear in the fabric of social cohesion. And that's why we understand now, we work upon ourselves, we try to control our inside so we don't become judgmental, because this lens that I'm just wearing right now, if it has scratches, particles of dust, everything that I see, even if it is beautiful, it's going to be blurry. So what do? Take out this and I wipe it. Once I wipe it, everything is clear. What we're talking about in this conference is this. How do we wipe the lens of our intellect, the lens of our heart? If our heart and our intellect has been scratched and it has particles of dust that do not allow us to see the positivity in the world, we're going to fail. That's it. So faith allows us to hold on to this.
Beautiful.
So we can keep cleaning. And remember, may it be COVID, or may it be another sickness that comes in the future, another virus, we will only know how good we are when we are placed in an environment that is not conducive to social cohesion. If everything is going well, if me and my wife are having a good time and my wife says, "You're a very good husband," I'll say, "Don't say that right now. Let me get angry first." Right? Then you will see that if I'm a good husband or not. The pandemic gave us the opportunity to see how good work we have done when we were not tested. So these miqats, these junctions that come in life where we are tested as human beings, are basically allowing us to know what we did not do, we need to do now. So when the next test comes, we won't fail in that area. And that's what faith does. Faith allows you to build yourself from within and then work upon the community. And that's why, may it be Islam, may it be Christianity or Judaism, if you were to ask them, who were the best people? Now, they're talking about a community. They're not talking about a prophet. Who is the best community? They will say the community that were the disciples. The community that were the Sahaba, the companions. Why? Because faith allowed them, and faith showed us that if you practice faith properly, the community that will be built from that faith will be the best community. Thank you.
Thank you. Chifu.
Okay, I go last. Okay, thank you, Imam, for your reminder of the values of humanity and our fellow panelists. Yes, the Buddha also talks about the dust in our eyes and how we should need to dust it away, and also to acknowledge that we are not perfect beings. Other beings do still have dust in them. And you also need to understand the notation of the word faith. Faith doesn't mean religion. A humanitarian who believe in science, that's their own faith. Those who believe in Groot, in the forest elf, they believe in the universe, in the natural world, that's their faith. So in the last YLP, one of the breakout groups that because the last one is go on conference, we choose what we want to discuss. And one of the group that I go for is religiosity and spirituality. And as we walk, a Ustad asked me, "Shifu, or Venerable, what's the difference?" To him, it's the same. I told him, in my vague understanding, everyone has intrinsic spirituality. Religion entity is a framework that helps us to understand the spirituality. So nowadays, there's the youth who say that I'm spiritual but not religious. I'm not going to say it's good or bad, but I think certain frameworks did help. But we need to understand that rituals are to guide our spiritual wealth. But the rituals itself is not the spiritual entity, but we need to go hand in hand. It's like either you control your mind or you control your body. For example, in TCM, it says that someone who are angry tends to have a bad liver. So you want to cure your liver to control the anger, the rush of anger, or you want to go the other way, the body or the mind. If you have good mental hygiene, you have good spiritual practices, then you have no problem with that. So in Buddhism, essentially, there's these things called immeasurables: the compassion, the metta, loving kindness, the mudita, the rejoice or appreciative joy, or the upekkha, the equanimity. These four wraps around anything if you want to do good. it encompasses within our heart. This is a spiritual quality. It's not a religious quality. It's a universal thing that we can do. When we see someone doing good things, we rejoice and we feel a lot of positive energy, as if you are the one who are doing it. I think this is very important. And just now I talked about ground sensing. Recently, I went to a funeral, a wake, and I was there. There is this lady who knows that I was active in the interfaith circle. So she asked me, "What do religious leaders talk about?" Because I say, "Why do you ask this?" They say, "Oh, among the lay people, there's 3 things they don't talk about: the religion, politics, and salary." So I also say, okay, I don't know about others, but among my religious interfaith friends, we talk about religion a lot. And some are very direct. And because we have these bridges, we are able to take very direct questions, very direct comments. And I personally won't take offense. I take it as an opportunity to unveil my personal views. I always say, this is my views. You might not, if you don't agree, it's okay, but this is from where I stand from. I will use stories, analogies, instead of saying, no, we are not like that. Yeah. So I think all these things are very important. So it emphasizes a lot of good friendships. It's about the people, children, old or young, coming together in matured conducts, accomplishing faith, ethics, generosity, and wisdom as we engage all these diverse dialogues. That's why I mentioned just dialogues is not about putting your point across. It's about opening our heart. As before I went to, as I go to the podium and speak, essentially when I was here closing my eyes, I'm not sleeping. I'm doing this thing what we call metta meditation or loving kindness meditation. It's to spread this energy of loving kindness to everyone here, regardless of race, regardless of religion. Even unseen beings may be around. May they feel the love, the compassion that we want to embrace this environment, this world that we live in.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those very erudite comments. One of the questions here essentially suggests that, one of the challenges when you talk about how faith can be a challenge for faith to bridge divides is when the differences in faith becomes insurmountable. Over, for example, what Lord Alderdice was saying, different, very dogmatic interpretations of faith that preclude any potential meeting of minds, which suggests to me, do you think that when faith becomes rigid, or as some scholars would say, the problem is not religion, the problem is religious fundamentalism. That's the problem, when positions become ossified, when positions become very dogmatic, rigid, there is no scope for negotiation. What do you think about this? Do you think that actually, in practical terms, what all of us should be looking for is when healthy faith becomes unhealthy through maybe developing rigid characteristics? What do you think? I mean, Sadhvi, what do you think?
I think that it's critical, as my Imam brother mentioned, for us to remember that at the core, first of all, we are soul, and then we are body of a human, an insan, and then that physical body, which has a size, a shape, a color, it was born in a certain place, it has, therefore, a nationality. It was born in a certain culture, a certain family. Therefore, it has a religion. It ends up getting a job, a career. Therefore, it has an income, a title, a bank account. There's so many aspects of this physical body and the history that it moves through in this incarnation for those of us who believe in reincarnation. And of all of those aspects, faith is, of course, one of them. Our religion is one of them. We have a gender, we have a color, we have a nationality, we have all of these other aspects to ourselves. And I think when we find ourselves in insurmountable situations on any of those levels, it's a critical moment for us all to take a step back and to go back to the first of just here we all are as human beings. And then even to go a step back to here we actually are as soul, as spirit, as essence, as consciousness, however your tradition may speak about that. They're only insurmountable when I am looking through the lens of my religion versus your religion. And in that moment, what I've done is I've essentially negated every other aspect of me, which is not my religion. Every other aspect of me that is not the way that I pray. And that's a negation of the very core of who we are, because just as I am not the size or the shape or the color of my body, just as I am not my title or my role or my bank account, well, similarly, I am not my religion, no matter how deeply important it is to me, no matter how fundamental it is to how I move through the world. It isn't ultimately who I am. And so when we find ourselves quite literally butting heads over religion or over any of these other aspects, that's the time for us to remember that that isn't who we are. I think it's also important, and that's the role where a lot of interreligious dialogue, where conflict resolution, where it really helps to have other people who know what they are doing come together, because when we are in that moment of anger, that moment of othering, that moment of us versus them, that moment of this sharp line between us, it's very difficult to just say, all right, let's sit down and find the oneness between us. It's very, very helpful to have someone else bring that to happen. But it's also really important, I think, for us to realize that in a lot of cases, I wouldn't say every case, but in a lot of cases, the insurmountable differences around what we call religion are actually not about how we pray. That it's really not that I cannot stand you, hate you, want to harm you, kill you, or remove you because I cannot stand the way you pray to God, or I cannot stand the name you use for God. That's pretty difficult to get people to feel so passionate about. It tends in many, many, many cases to be much more about allocation of resources, allocation of power, allocation of money. And that's where we tend to see a lot of these insurmountable differences arise, is it's not just over how we pray. It's over who's controlling this aspect of government, who's controlling this policy, who's controlling this resource. And that's where it's so important for us on every level. Levels of policy, levels of education, even though we know it's not the cure-all that we would like to think it is, to really work to bring about this cohesion in our societies on levels other than just religion, so that religion doesn't become this handy tool to use to get co-opted in order to foster violence that really is about resources and power.
Thank you. What others?
I find myself, like a lot of people, starting to look again at the question of fundamentalism, particularly religious fundamentalism, after 9/11, because suddenly we were thrown into a situation where people, because of what they believed, appeared to be prepared to harm themselves and other people. And as I began to look at it, I began to reflect that this way of thinking, not the content of the beliefs, which could be quite different, but the way of thinking, this fundamentalist way of thinking, was actually something I was very familiar with in my own home territory of Northern Ireland, where people were very clear that they were right, the other person was wrong. Maybe it was even important to force the other person to your perspective because they were so wrong and you were so right. And I could see this in all sorts of parts of the world. The more I looked at it, I found that there were Christian fundamentalists, Hindu fundamentalists, Jewish fundamentalists. I thought for a while that the one faith group that would not be fundamentalists were Buddhists. And then I went to Sri Lanka and places like that, and I discovered even the Buddhists hadn't found a way of preventing fundamentalism. And of course, many people who are not religious, maybe who are scientists, who are committed to science as a way of thinking, become quite fundamentalist as well. Their way of thinking is like this. And so as I began to look at it, first in my own part of the world and then elsewhere, one thing that seemed to be quite common was that where a community felt itself in some way under existential threat, you began to find a rise in fundamentalism. It was as though when people were extremely frightened, not just a bit upset, but really quite terrified, they began to look for certainty about things that you can't be certain about. There's an awful lot of things in life you just can't be certain about. You try to make your best judgment call and so on, but you can't know it for sure. But that's very frightening for people. And I think as the world has developed over the last 100 years, it has become an increasingly frightening world for people. The First World War was frightening. And you found the rise of fundamentalism there in the United States and so on at that time. And as life has gone on, it has become more and more frightening. And now there are things that could bring us all to an end. And so we're living in an age of profound anxiety. And I think in that context, people look for certainty. And fundamentalism is not about going back to the past. It's about going back, it's about changing the present into a past that never existed, a past that was certain, was secure, you knew exactly what the score was. And it's really a way of getting away from a very frightened, and sometimes people say, oh, well, these people are very frightened, as though you shouldn't be. But actually it is very frightening. In fact, if you really thought about all the things that are going wrong, you'd never get through your cornflakes in the morning, because it's a really very frightening world. So we need to be understanding of this. And when we face people who have fundamentalist beliefs, I think the important thing may well be to, as I was saying in my comments, listen to them and think, what is it that they are fearful of? Because maybe the fear is not itself unreasonable, even if the reaction to it is unhelpful.
Beautiful.
I went to Australia in 1996, so I saw a transition, pre-9/11, post-9/11. Pre-9/11, if I was to take this off and you just visualize me all in white, and I was walking down the street, and the son will say to the mother, "Mother, there's Jesus." You look like Jesus. Post-9/11, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that. The question is, because this is the forte where we have been working, that how do people, these are people like us that have families, that have good jobs, that have been good fathers, good sons, suddenly they become fundamentalists. How? It's basically when people are not practicing social cohesion. When people think that they have been isolated and picked upon because of their faith, that's when things start to change. Now, we found that in Australia, there were many sisters that took off their hijab. They said, we can't endure this anymore. That people are staring at us, people are scoffing us, people are labeling us. So they don't want to be identified as Muslims outside. So they took off their hijab. Many men, they shaved their beards and gave themselves nicknames. Like from Habib, they became Happy. I said, when did you become happy? So his name was Habib, and he changed his name to Happy. So he could not be identified as a Muslim. Now, those people, they step away from faith. But there's a very small group that will step deeper into faith. And my dear brother, he made mention that the content is not a problem. The content is not a problem. It's how you look at the content. I can say that half the glass is empty, or I can say half the glass is full. Both are the same. Half full, half empty. It's how you look at things. Now, when the mind is distorted and it becomes sinister and vindictive, then you will find in beautiful words something sinister. I can read a book, you can read the same book, but your mindset will determine how you give a ruling. Many a times, our scholarship, our teachers, they give us advice. They say, when you're counseling people, you can't counsel a husband and a wife if you're having problems at home. You can't. Because the whole film that runs at home will run in your mind, and you will give an opinion, a verdict that will favor the man over the lady. So your mind has to be in the right place. So when people think that they are targeted and they are isolated and they have never experienced that before, you're going to find two groups, like I made mention. Some people are going to leave the faith, the practice in faith, and some people are going to go further into the faith. Now, there are certain people in the world, in all faiths, that don't have a sound mind. They will exploit these people and feed them poison. So what do we need to do as people to tackle fundamentalism? We need to be those that physically counter that narrative. If, for example, as an Imam, if I am always at every airport being put to the side, you come here, and they say it's random. I said, random is not my name. But if always they're placing me to the side and they're asking me questions and I'm looking at the whole airport and the whole airport is looking at me with the cap and with this attire, that is going to even change the mind of a very positive person. So collectively, we need to come on one stage, on one platform. And we learned this when the sad incident took place in Christchurch. When many Muslims were killed at the time of Jumu'ah, at the time of prayer, a lot of youngsters came to us and they said, Imam, we need to talk about this. I said, wait on. Yesterday we were saying that if there's one rotten apple, don't uproot the entire tree. Remove the rotten apple. 2 days ago we were saying that we are Muslims. Don't judge us because of the actions of one or two. So the same thing now. This one guy is not representing Christianity. So we need to look at those people that are causing harm to the social fabric as we want people to look at us. When people from our community cause harm. And that's how we have to address fundamentalism. It's not an issue that we can't tackle, but we need to be on that one platform. And like I said before, it all starts with that big smile. Thank you.
Thank you, Imam. Shifu.
I have a lot of echoing to do. Thank you, Lord Alderdice, for bringing into mind the risk of religious fundamentals and underlying divergence in strong views. I think I also echoes with the points that Imam have raised just now. Compassion, selfless listening. Actually, this is very much in what Imam said. Listen. You need to listen. And this will nurture deeper root level understanding, investigate the intrinsic needs and values that we all hear there. So it also leads us to self-surrender or selfless kind of actions. Like equations that I would like to share. How will you find this person worthy? You observe the actions, the words, and the feeling, the thoughts that you can trust this person, and divide by the intention. If this person has many multi-agendas, the trustworthiness will be divided. If one single agenda, whatever he do equates to what he trusts. If this person is selfless, have a non-ego kind of mindset, go beyond self, the others before self, then the trustworthiness will be exponential. So I think this is all very important, and we need to work and connect everything together to create this symbiotic relationship, economics, job-based inclusiveness, practical adjustments, that what all our speakers have mentioned. And I also like to align Dr. Saraswati, your sharings with some wise words from our last speaker, in the last ICCS. Her name is Karen Armstrong, and she is the founder of the International Charter for Compassion. And in this charter, the first part you mentioned a very strong point. Compassion is compassion is the test of true spirituality in all faith, bring us into relations with the transcendence. I think this is something that is anyone, regardless of what faith or which, that we want to go on from here. Compassion, the word compassion is not a Buddhist word. It's not an Indian word. It's English, yes, but it never belongs to any religion or faith. I think this is the gelling mechanism that we need to hold on in our heart. When we are lost, we are lonely, and so on and so forth. I have people who tell me that when I'm with friends, I'm not lonely. When I leave these companies of many people, I felt lonely. Then I was like, okay, I'm not lonely. When I'm with friends, I'm among friends, I connect. When I was alone, I connect with the Buddha, the Bodhisattva, to the Dharmic realms, or to Psalms, to God, the divine. When you're alone, you connect to your spiritual self, and you will never be alone. You enjoy these very precious relationships or these connections to the higher beings, or for us, the Dharmic realms. So, I think all these are very important points that our fellow speakers have shared, and hope that we will take it true to our heart and we walk the path. Walk the talk, not talk the talk. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a very good question that has come in, and I think it's a very practical question because we're also looking for actual guidance from the panel and your own views. This question is, we want to promote social cohesion in a multi-religious society, but at the same time, some of the challenges arise from particular groups that have a very strong proselytization or evangelism agenda, right? So, in your view, how do you strike the balance between being open and dealing with such groups that are very strong in proselytization? Perhaps in order, Shifu, that you don't have to echo, maybe you start from yourself.
Good. Thank you. I think this is much mentioned in my speech just now about the proselytizations, but I know in some faith it's their duty to proselytize. I think you can share, but don't just shove it down the throat of people. if they profess that they have a faith, just fold palms and respect their faith and wish them well, and may them practice hard in the path that you choose. Instead of, yeah, my faith is better than yours. I think in all of us here, if we have a religion, our faith, because our affinity, our connections, is always the best. But is it always the best to someone else? Like later on, when we go for lunch, if you like rice, for example, do you say that everyone must take rice? And we just remove the noodles. It's a self-preference. Faith is a very intimate connections. Therefore, when we want to check whether is it okay even to share faith, I always use these analogies. And going to interfaith dialogues, or even to a church or temple, we shouldn't be afraid that we will be converted, because we are strong with our own faith. To go into dialogue is like akin to a buffet, okay? You taking a halal food don't make you a Muslim. You taking a vegetarian food don't make you a Buddhist or Jain. It's testing. Whatever you like, you take more. And you integrate in values. You need not pray. I mean, I'm a marriage solemnizer myself, and not all my couples are Buddhists. I have other faith couples. But after solemnization, they leave whatever faith they belong to. They don't leave a Buddhist. I have a couple who comes to me and say that, do I need to be a Buddhist to invite you to be my solemnizer? I'm happy to do it as long as you respect the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, the basic respect in my faith. And I will give you my blessings. There's no barrels in this. Yeah, I share with them the universal values of marriage. If they're happy and they want to use it, by all means, they use it. I never say, you must. Yeah, but I emphasize on one very important thing. In the Buddhist precepts, the third precept, no sexual misconduct or no adultery. I emphasize, for marriage to work, you must promise me that you must do it, regardless of race or religion. Because if not, then why do you want to sign the paper? If you cannot promise in the spiritual context a promise, and you just say that in legal, okay, you can do it. I think that's the structure that is, when we come to structures and fundamentals, it's useful. We need certain guidance, some baseline. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Imam.
In regards to that was pretty weak.
We have a big one at the end.
All right. And don't remove the noodles, please. In regards to faith, as a Muslim, my faith demands from me to believe that the faith that I'm practicing is the best faith. Because if I don't believe it's the best faith, I won't practice it. So that's what the faith demands. But at the same time, the faith makes a very, very clear statement, and that statement is La ikraha fid deen. There's no compulsion in the faith. So if I'm a Muslim, I believe that Islam is the best faith. That's why I am a Muslim. Because a human being always wants to have the best, if he can have the best. So I believe as a Muslim, my faith is the best. At the same time, the faith demands that there's no compulsion in faith, that you can't force others into faith. Then the faith, as we know from day one, not every person in the time of Moses became a follower of the Torah. And not every person in the time of Jesus, peace be upon him, became a follower of the Injil. And not every person in the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, followed the Quran. So if the best of the best couldn't bring everyone on one platform, you and me are not going to be achieving that. So we need to understand that. So what we understand is that these great personalities, they shared the best product that they had. They wanted everyone to share that product. to inculcate that product. But if somebody didn't, what did the Prophet of the time do with that person? Then they look at them through the lens as a human being. Then compassion comes in. Empathy comes in. We take care of every human being, but we believe that faith is the constitution by which the person can extract the best from life. One school child came to me and he said that you're a Muslim, I'm not a Muslim. What's the difference? You eat, I eat, you drink, I drink, you sleep, I sleep, you enjoy sports, I enjoy sports. I said that what faith does, it allows us to not waste time in those things that we should not engage in. Just like now, brother made mention that he will officiate a marriage, but he will tell the couple not to do naughty stuff. Don't do naughty stuff. Be loyal to your husband. Be loyal to your wife. Makes mention of that. Now, if faith didn't make mention of that and we did certain things in life, we're going to have to stand up, redeem ourselves, and it's going to take all that time. God Almighty knows that we got 60 or 70 years in life, and He doesn't want us to fall, just like the father and the mother. The father and the mother say, sons, don't do this, because if you do this, you're going to come back crying to us, because we did this, and we made a mistake when we were young, so don't make the same mistakes. So that's what faith is, but faith does demand there's no compulsion. We don't force anyone to become a Muslim. If somebody is, it's a problem. Now, I did make mention in the opening statement that being judgmental is the problem. This is the problem. And this is where it all starts from. If a person believes that he has the best product, and if he starts judging other people that they have a lesser product and that makes me better, that's where the problem starts from. And that's why with the inculcation of spiritual guidance from whichever faith you are, you will be allowed to control that sentiment that basically transforms into being judgmental. And that is kibr. And I will end on all of us, we have been made from soil, and we're going to return into soil. And the characteristic of soil is humility. Thousands of people every day walk, trample over soil, and it says, you are still my friend. When you die, I'm going to embrace you, and I'm going to give you a place inside me. As human beings, if we can return back to our disposition, to our main characteristics, humility, indeed, we will attain social cohesion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Alderdice?
I think it's very tempting to believe that one can come up with a kind of set of principles or rules that apply to every society at every stage. And I guess I would have been more content to do that when I was rather younger and more clear about some important things. For example, it would have been easier for me in those days to have been critical of Singapore because of some of the ways that Singapore runs its affairs. And coming from the liberal democratic background I came from, it didn't seem to conform entirely to that. But as time has gone on, I've come to realize that different societies are in different stages and at different places. Singapore was trying to develop itself under all kinds of threats and difficulties, internal and external. And the kinds of things you have to do in those circumstances to survive are very different from the kinds of things you have to do if you are the United States of America. And what you do in the United States now and what you did in the United States 200 years ago are very different. I often say that when Americans talk about the right to bear arms, I say, I absolutely agree with your Constitution. Every American should have the right to bear a flintlock. Because that's what it was like in those days. But they didn't have SLRs in those days, you know, and ground-to-air missiles, so it wasn't relevant. So I think when we're looking at different societies, without being entirely uncritical, because all of our societies should be open to some discussion and criticism, nevertheless, we need to be a little... So when it comes to the specific question of how do you deal with proselytizing in your society, I think in some societies it's easier than in others. But I think it also depends on the person who's doing the proselytizing and how they do it. If, for example, you've got someone who insists on being disrespectful of others through the amount of noise or intrusion or the place or the time or the way in which they do it, then I think it's not necessarily out of order to suggest to them that maybe they need to also be respectful of others so that they can be respectful of them and their approach to things. So it's not that there's one simple set of rules, but that in all of our situations, and the situations of our countries change from time to time, it's not just about rights, it's also about respect, and it's about the relationships we have within our communities. And that degree of understanding is not that easy to sustain and maintain, and it does change from time to time for better and for worse. So it's not so much just about a set of rules that I could make out to deal with all situations of proselytizing. There are some situations where it is blocked completely. And I think that makes those societies the poorer. There are also societies where anything goes, and it usually makes those societies disparate and often difficult to sustain. So some sort of thoughtful, balanced engagement with difference and diversity is, I think, important in the long run for our societies to aim for.
Thank you.
I think it's important to look at what that proselytization is actually doing. If what I'm doing is sharing my love, it's beautiful. But if what I'm doing is tying my love of my faith to something that is critical to your health, safety, peace, then that no longer is something that should exist in peaceful, cohesive societies. An easy way, and one of my favorite ways to think about it, is I've got my arms. And my arms are mine, they're part of my body, and when I'm feeling exuberant and in love, whether I'm loving my mother or my faith, and I go like this, and I may share with you my love, and I may be very, very, passionate in the use of my arms, well, okay, beautiful. Until and unless you are standing so close to me that every time I'm exuberant, I'm bopping you in the face, then my freedom to share my love of my faith is now impeding your right to live without being bopped on the nose. And to the extent that I am simply sharing love of how we connect with the divine in my faith, beautiful. Like I share how much we love rice. Or, in India, it's, are you a rice person or a chapati person? And, right? People may show out and say, I want to eat rice. No, I want chapati. Okay, no problem. But where it becomes tied to your access to medical care, to education, or to simply live in a safe environment, we are no longer talking about love. We are talking about oppression. If a woman, a poor village woman, travels all night carrying her feverish baby in her arms, and this woman walks all night long through the forest, through the jungles, through the villages, to finally get to a hospital. And in order to get her feverish baby treated, she has to become the religion of the hospital she's brought her baby to. That's violence. That woman no longer is free regardless of the political structure of her country's government. And so when we look at proselytization, to me, that line needs to be drawn where my exuberant love is now bopping you on the face and impeding your right to live a free, healthy, safe life.
Thank you very much, Sadhvi. Well, thank you. We have had a very rich panel on various perspectives on how faith can bridge divides, and we had a very good discussion, in-depth discussion on how faith done wrongly can actually promote divides. So we have had a lot to chew on because time is quickly coming to an end. Please, join me in thanking our panelists. Thanks very much. Sadhvi, Lord Alderdice, Imam, Shifu.